Hi, everybody. Dave Donaldson here with Joe Martin and Keith Barrett for our 2-episode arc on the changes that we're seeing or may not be seeing in the real estate industry. So welcome to another episode of Entrepreneurial Impact.
Well, it also goes into like confidence and sense of community and like home pricing increases, and like you just have to see that like what happens when people have shelter and things like that. And I think that's one of the big things that I have challenges with there. The other one is, if you talk about like, if you like, my point on this has nothing to do with like brokerage or agents, has everything to do with the consumer. Because when you think about that harms the consumer. The next thing that harms the consumer is if you don't have call it a public MLS or a standard of where things go. It's kind of like so like, let's break this one down, right? So everybody has access to Google, right? Everyone has access to Yahoo or Bing or whatever the heck those things are called. You have free access to information, whether or not it's...
For those at home, he's referencing a search engine, just because you didn't know what that was.
Yeah. Or Ask Jeeves, right?
Jeeves, oh my goodness.
Bring it back. I say this because, like, let's use an analogy that most people can see is that, okay, so if you've got free access, this is why a lot of times you see state and federal subsidies on internet, because they want access to things that make people's lives better in education, right? A better educated society is going to have a better, robust economy, and pick your poison on that one. So if you don't have, if you can only get a hold of Google, you can only get a hold of Bing, and I can only get a hold of Ask Jeeves, what does that do for the open market of consumer and also for seller, right? So when you start to say, okay, now we're going to get away with MLSs that are controlled by the local boards and the boards or whatever, now you're incentivizing brokerages to set up their own internal system that only people that are agents of that broker can access. So when you think about that, you're going to harm the consumer as a seller because they're not going to get the broadest reach of consumers for price points. And you're also going to harm buyers because they're not, if they're working with a ABC realtor and the house they actually want is with XYZ, they're not even going to know that XYZ listing's there. So you hurt by having that internal thing, but you're actually incentivizing the industry to do that because, like, well, if I can't do this on MLS and I can't do this with blah, 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 then I'm going to have to do it this way. And then it's basically going to say that one brokerage that has market share is going to have the, like, fail-safe benefits of that because they control all the listings.
So, Joe, you kind of trumped the question. I'm going to ask the question and rephrase everything anyways. It's like, that all kind of falls into, well, now what? Right?
Exactly.
If we've had the result of the first lawsuit, because this is what we're talking about, guys, is that this is just the first settlement.
That's right.
Now we're seeing lawsuits start to pop up all around the country because that was a test balloon case. Mm-hmm. Where are we going now? And how many of these do you going to see, and when is this going to end?
Yeah, that's a great question. I got a couple of things to say on what Joe said. So you're going to see copycat lawsuits. The big one coming down the pike that's already been filed and is in the wings is the Merle case, because unlike the Burnett-Sitzer trial that was focused on Missouri, the Federal District Court in Missouri, the Merle case covers large swaths of the United States.
Okay.
The class in that particular case is much larger. And they're predicting that if this goes the same way that Sitzer-Burnett went with the same outcome, you're going to be looking at a damages award of 40 to 50 billion in that case, not 5 billion, 40 to 50
Joe,
billion.
you can stroke that check, right?
Yeah. We all got that money just lying around.
Under the cushions.
Yep.
I'm going to say this because this is like, do you know what I heard how much, just to interrupt this one, just for comic relief here.
Let's talk about money.
All right. So, and I could be completely wrong, and I'll put that asterisk here, right?
This is the disclosure episode.
Once again, this is disclosure, right? I don't know if I was right on the broker stuff. I'm not a broker, and I'm just going to say if I'm wrong, right? So they had a $1.8 billion settlement in the Missouri case, right?
Yeah.
And
with treble damages.
With whatever that is. So my thing is, but if they don't have that money, the money doesn't get paid out, right? So let's also be clear on that one, right? Oh, great, you won $1.8 billion, but if you can't pay it, then where's it going to go, right?
By the way, that's called being judgment proof.
Yeah, right. So my point is that, so I heard, and I would love to be wrong on this one, but they had a $1.8 billion settlement. Now it's going to go to appeal because they're already putting bonds up from Keller Williams and Berkshire and NAR. But From what I was told, based on the amount of the class action like representatives that were represented by those attorneys, each person roughly is going to receive $2,000 on the settlement. That's what I heard.
Yeah, how much the lawyer's going to get? 40%.
That's my point. So when we think about like this, just going back to consumer rights, like this is the thing that like bothers the heck out of me, is that the people that were so causedly harmed, $2,000 is going to fix their challenges and whatever they sold their homes for. No, like let's be clear here. 40% is going to an attorney, and that's why you're getting all these copycats, right? And this is why I've got family members that are attorneys. But why do you think we get this whole like ambulance?
Is 40 chickens a fixed cost?
Well, but like here's the thing. Like going back to like what's beneficial to the consumers and the economy at large. How is setting an example of why we want to break up and not have antitrust, but then you have a situation where the people that are supposedly hurt are getting 2,000. Like, correct. Like that doesn't make sense.
I said this also. If you remember at the beginning, so we're in episode 2. So if you think back to episode 1, right when I started off, that's about follow the money. VC came in here in droves to fund because of the amount of chickens that were at risk. So let's follow the money again, right? Who benefits from this? Not the consumers.
CoStar.
Oh.
Well, so
all right, so now you want to get deep.
So let's get
deep
back.
State, right? Deep
right?
State
Well, yeah.
Let me combine your
CoStar,
two,
right?
right? Yeah. So Joe asked about like the MLSs. You said what's next?
Yeah.
So again, I mean, let's be honest. No one knows really what's going to happen.
Okay.
Right? Because we're still kind of feeling this out.
I'm waiting to see what the odds on FanDuel are. But go ahead.
Right. But I've been thinking about this. Like, what are both the intended and unintended consequences? So what we could see is if there is aggressive action taken here in terms of some sort of injunctive relief, there's a lot of MLSs out there, right? We happen to be in one Bright that is very large, 800-pound gorilla, but there are MLSs out there that are really small, not well funded, don't have a lot of membership. So I think one of the unintended consequences of this is we might see some very rapid consolidation. A lot of M&A going on. And it's not necessarily going to be MLSs devouring each other, but it could be organizations like, say it, you just did.
The
CoStar.
No,
CoStar.
Of, like commercial real estate. Yeah,
CoStar.
Yeah.
Because look, data's the new gold. And a lot of it's been made available, and companies know that. So
and who controls homes.com?
So that's exactly right. So we could see a lot of upending in businesses, particularly amongst the MLS, in terms of consolidation here, because also without these required mandatory rules, because who knows what's going to happen with that as well, what are you going to have to show at that point? More value. You're going to have to give more value to the users of that service. And we know in this business, particularly as it relates to technology and data, that size and scale allows you the ability to create more value more easily than some of these smaller ones. They're going to have a very hard time doing it. So,
and who else did CoStar acquire? Wasn't it Showing Time?
No, that wasn't them. That was the other big gorilla in the room. Who will remain nameless.
So I just think it's interesting that like you see that, because if they break up all this stuff, who comes in that already has the technology and has shown a path to control all of the commercial data.
Yep.
That's why I say follow the money. Right? It's not the buyers who are actually being protected here. They want to put the real estate realtors out of business, right? And who are the companies that benefit from it? CoStar is one. Amazon's another. And another is a company called, we'll just call them, they start with a Z. They all want us out of business, right? So follow the money.
You know what's funny about the Zillow, though? I actually will say nothing negative about it, because I can game recognizes game. Like, they did a great job in their business acumen. What I think is interesting about Zillow is that they still haven't been able to get past search. Like, people go into Zillow search, they get eyeballs on it, but they don't go any farther than that, right? They don't. So the question for Zillow, they've tried going into like mortgage and title, and they've said this. That's why they stopped those instant buy programs. It was such a loss. They haven't figured out how to actually go end to end on the transaction, and they've actually had to double down on the agent because they realize that the only way that they're closing transactions and referral money is they have to have agent partners.
But they continue to try to bring all that in house too.
They're
right?
trying to, but
So they're the ones that acquired Showing Time that you brought up,
Yeah, yeah.
right? They just purchased Follow Up Boss. They previously bought Dot Loop, right? They had purchased Market Leader
Correct.
originally. So what were all those acquisitions in order to do?
Well, because
Keith,
they
it goes-
like agents, right?
well, and it goes back to the data,
100%,
right? So
100%.
if they have search and they have databases now, two companies that they've acquired over time, now they have the ability to write contracts through Dot Loop. Now they know all the agents' transactions or activities that are going on in and out of houses. So again, when I say follow the money, who stands to gain? Yes, I recognize that they sell leads, but there's a bigger end game for them on some of this. And the same goes to the CoStar too. It's search. It's control of the transactions, control of the consumer. It's not at the benefit of the consumer.
There's a lot of money at stake in this business, and that's why. And you said it to start, Dave. We've just seen over the years attempt after attempt to disarticulate real estate agents, quite frankly, from the transaction, because there's a big pool of money to be had for the organization that can.
Well, I'll use
this out.
Joe's Turner. I'll go more the mafia side. Not disarticulate. It's dismember.
Yeah, or the yeah.
Well, what's interesting though is that like when you talk about like money though, when you think about like, all right, so they're going to transact 4.5, give or take a couple 100,000 homes, right? And say the average price for a home is $400,000, so it's $12,000 on 3 chickens or something like that. But like, okay, so it's a couple $100 million in like GCI, like probably close to $1 billion in GCI, right? But when you look at homes under management, the amount of money that can be made off of like, if you had a Amazon home services, so think about all the stuff that you do on Amazon because it's easy. What happens when you manage your home?
Yeah.
And then you actually put all the Angie's List stuff into a home management app. There is no home management app. There's a couple things that say like, right? But there's no managing the home. And like where the real money at, you're talking about trillions of dollars inside of home management, from landscaping to maintenance to whatever, because you've got a bunch of millennials coming from Class A apartments that don't know what a filter is. They don't know. I no kidding, talked to a friend of mine that's in his 40s, and I said, he goes, "What are you doing right now?" I go, "I'm winterizing my house in Virginia." He lives in Texas. He's like, "What is winterizing a house?" Literally had no idea how to like shut off hose bibs or anything like that. So you're going from a bunch of people that went and had everything served to them to then say you should buy a home because it's wealth building and all that kind of stuff. They buy a home and now they're like, I don't know what to do. What do you mean I got to change an air filter? What do you mean that like my HVAC is shot because I didn't change out the air filter, right? Or that, oh, there's a water filter. Well, hey, there's no ice in my fridge. Oh yeah, your filter's clogged. You should probably change that every 6 months. So there's a whole industry. When you talk about company dollar and GCI, it's a blip compared to what you could have when you have dominant houses under management for all the services that can be monetized off of that. Because think about all the entrepreneurs that are like contractors, they're painters, they're drywall people, whatever, and they have no ability to market themselves. So what happens when you tie into a platform that allows you to quickly process payment and do basically Uber of management of homes? And that's where, if you want to talk about where the industry goes, that's where it goes.
It's an interesting thought.
No, it's kind of crazy to think about what's next, and there's a big question mark going on there. But let's bring it back to what's next and how does it immediately affect the industry, right? Because we mentioned a couple of things. Okay, there's been a settlement. Well, that means no money's been paid. There's been some changes to contracts. Well, that happened in July, right? And some things that happened, and we're going to see some more disclosure things happen and come across, at least probably forums across the country. Even though we know you touched on MLSs, I think the boards get gobbled up too. But we're going to see some form changes happening too. But what really happens, and what does anything at all happen to the realtors themselves and the buyers in today's world based off of what just got decided?
I mean, well, so okay, honest answer: who really knows?
That's the long term, right?
That would be boring to leave it there, right?
Yeah.
And people want everyone else to have a crystal ball. So here's mine. I think in the short term, not much happens. I think for most people, it's going to be, I'm not sure I'd say business as usual because there's this kind of cloud hanging overhead, but I think it's going to look and feel not much different from what people were doing, October 30th. Now, a lot of the mid and long term, however, is going to depend on how the rest of this plays out, right? Like what the final judgment is, the appeals, et cetera.
But those appeals could take years.
It's going to take a while.
Yeah.
It's going to take a while. So, I think what it looks like in that case will depend on two things, because I think there's there's more than two possible outcomes, but in my mind, the two most likely possible outcomes are, one, the rules around MLS, the NAR, handbook and listing policy, all of that will get revised. The code of ethics will be revised to just make it clear that the cooperative compensation is completely optional, to be totally transparent about it. Like you said, get the education in. And brokerages will clean up some of their training and all this evidence that was produced at this trial. And then we'll move forward with it with still having a cooperative compensation structure, but one that is just more openly and clearly optional, as opposed to what seemed to be very much mandatory up until this point. That's one. And in which case, again, I'm not sure there's going to be this tectonic shift in the industry if that's the case, right? It'll still be that way. There'll be more transparency. Maybe you'll see a little bit more chicken variation, which I think would be a good thing as it relates to any scrutiny under antitrust, because that was part of their case, that there was no variation, and it proved that there was a combination going on here. The harder one, and this gets back to the whole lending discussion we had, the harder one is if there is action taken and cooperative compensation is now just no longer allowed. That's going to be the one now we're going to see. But we'll see water flow around the rock, right? We're industry, and it's a huge industry. And like I said, no matter what happens in this outcome, 4 to 6 million people are still going to transact homes every year.
We'll adopt.
That's right. And so the industry is going to adapt, and it's going to be like that river that flows around the big rocks. This would be a huge rock dropped right in the middle, and industry will find its way around it. And whether it's using seller subsidies, whether the lending community is going to have to go back and look at certain regulations and say, can we now finance this? Will this be allowed? Because let's face it, it's in the lender's best interest, right, to promote these transactions. Industry will find a way. Industry will find a way. And let me offer this. There have been investment banking. There's a lot of interested parties, as you said, follow the money.
Yep.
There's been investment banking reports on what's going on and what some outcomes are going to be. And in some of the more drastic what next scenarios, I've looked at some of these reports that say you could see, in the worst case scenario, 30 to 40% of the agent population go away, and 25 to 30% of the entire commission pool go away. But I kind of look at that differently. Like, I kind of look at it for, like, Dave and Joe and people like within the organizations that care about their business, care about their clients, are offering real value. Maybe that's not a bad thing to have 25% of your competition go away, right? Like, maybe that's not a bad thing. I don't know, but industry is going to find a way.
Yeah.
And the people that are offering value, I've said for a long time to real estate agents that if you think your job is to find people a home, that was gone a long time ago. That's not your value. Your value is more like a Sherpa, like a very trusted counselor, because people only do these transactions 9, 10, 11, once every 9, 10, or 11 years. And while it's not rocket science to us, if you only do a transaction like this every 10 years, it might as well be rocket science. It's very confusing for people.
Correct, yes.
And they need guidance. The first thing we learn in law school is a lawyer who represents himself as a fool for a client. That's the expression. A lawyer who represents himself as a fool for a client. And it's because when you're involved in the deal, when you're involved in the controversy, when you're involved in the real estate transaction, you automatically lose 20 IQ points.
Emotion. Yep.
Right? You could be a perfectly rational, accomplished person, and the moment you're involved in a deal, that all goes out the window. And so I need Dave to help me to not be stupid, right? And not do stupid things.
Correct.
And so there's going to be value there, I think, no matter what the outcome is. And like you said, Dave, industry is going to find a way at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, short term, right? So if you're talking short term, like one of the things I think will actually come out heavily is limiting listing services, right? The challenge with that, though, with limiting listing services is that you're on the hook for E&O on the whole transaction. So even if you're only doing the contract, anything goes wrong in that, you're on the hook exposure liability-wise for the entire thing, even if you weren't doing something. So there's probably going to be some change in that. The other thing in finance, or the lending and title side, so what was funny is I was running a panel probably 3 or 4 months ago in Virginia Beach, and I asked a bunch of lenders and title attorneys, I was like, give me some ideas on your lead generation. And what was fascinating is down the entire row was agent referrals. They literally, I was like, okay, I didn't expect this. I probably should ask this question and like understood what the response was going to be before, because literally every one of them said agent referrals. So I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, if 90% of your business is agent referrals, and we all understand that refinancing ain't coming back for a very long time. Like refinance ain't going to be it.
Nope.
So it's going to be agent referrals. So my question is that like maybe this is once again controversial, is that if you go back to CFPB and you've got some things going on in consumer protection, which is what this is that so if you know the lenders have to get referrals and title has to get referrals from agents, the agent's always going to have the control of the relationship, right? So if you get to a place where they have to finance commissions to get deals done, I think Fannie and Freddie's eventually going to find some way to do that so people can have representation, because anybody that goes down for consumer protection is going to say, yes, you need professional services. You need this is too much of a complicated deal not to have professional services. So now what happens? The loan officers finally come back and say, yeah, we can start financing commissions, but there's a cap. There's already caps on commissions for loan officers on jumbo loans. So you don't think that Fannie and Freddie's going to control it and say, oh, you know what, for protection of the consumer, there's going to be a max compensation that can be financed. You already see this. So like I could see a play that says, yes, we have to do this because they need representation, and yes, the when you finance a XYZ commission, it's only a couple bucks a month or something like that for that representation that they got the house. You see all this, and then all of a sudden and I'm not a big fan of big government, but all of a sudden you get regulation that protects consumers because of a couple bad actors.
You know, there's one other play, which, again, if you follow the money, membership, right? We look at the amount of licensed realtors are, and we talk about, okay, we're probably going to see a big transition this year, but that's because of the amount of units being sold is down, just because of the state of the market. It has nothing to do with the lawsuit. I would think, what a better time to change our barrier of entry and our education requirements for the industry, right? We're going to see 3, 4, 500,000 agents get out of the business. Who knows what the actual number will be? We'll find out in January, right? When all the renewals happen. But imagine a world where, because of the number of chickens that are transacted, that the barrier of entry was higher. Mm-hmm. But because of schools, because of membership dues, because all those things are affected too. Right, they're affected because the more people that are licensed, the more money certain organizations make.
100%.
There's so much more that could happen, and probably should and could happen above and beyond. And I think a well-documented change in some best practices about what we're doing, either through how we present what we do, how we represent what we do, and how the contracts are written around it. They need to be changed. We change it twice a year anyways, but these are going to be some radical changes.
I couldn't agree more. I think you're definitely going to see that, and I think that's a good point. I think you're right. There is a tension there in terms of like that barrier to entry that you talked about, raising the level of education, creating a higher barrier of entry. But on the other hand, from a trade association point of view, you want membership.
Yeah,
you want members. So, but I, for one, again, not to be controversial, but Dave, I couldn't agree with you more. I think education, training, higher barrier to entry would all be very positive things. I'd certainly vote to see that.
I don't imagine NAR hiring me anytime soon with some of my point of views, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess you just like final takeaways on it is that like the transaction is there hasn't been any of evolution of the transaction. You still have to have hopefully a realtor or Sherpa to guide you through the transaction.
I like the Sherpa. I'm gonna get my Sherpa name badge.
Right. You're still gonna need a lender. You're still gonna need title. You're still gonna need homeowners insurance on it. You're still gonna need appraisal. So like traditionally, yes, there's a lot of noise and changes like that are out of the control, but they're not actually affecting the transaction. I think a lot of people in real estate need to realize is that the sales cycle that you're normally experiencing is 30 to 60 days. So you hear this settlement thing and you expect, oh, well, my industry moves so quickly, it's going to happen tomorrow. No, this is going to take years.
Yeah.
It's going to take absolute years, and you're also going to see a bunch of testing on this cooperative compensation thing that's going to go on. You're going to see aggressive like go down to zero, and then you're going to see some people maintain it whatever it is, and they're going to do all that to see what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is you're going to see, do days on market extend? Do price points go down? Do they like what happens, right? And it's going to take 18, probably 24 months to see like how these different things test in an open market, which I encourage because like it's a free market. Let's see what actually works and what's best for the sellers and what's best for the buyers. But I think in the short term, you're still going to need agents. You're going to still need like trusted advisors. You're going to still have to navigate these complex transactions because there's not an end-to-end solution that somebody can go in like Carvana and figure it out all online and then have a car dropped off at your house 24 hours later. It's not happening. You still have to do title search. You still have to do all these insurance things. You don't have any blockchain in that. So you're still having to do that. So the people that actually are great experts and fiduciaries to their clients are going to get more business. And because of this market at higher interest rates and all this other noise that's going on, the better skilled players in there are going to take the majority market share, and they're going to learn what the best practices are so that the future of this industry is evolved based on the people that are leading the pack on how you evolve it as opposed to figuring out what happened 20 years ago, and you have to change. I think that if you take anything away from this podcast, it's like the people that are like tacticians in real estate right now, you have to change, you have to evolve, and you have to do something different because it's like all your outside forces are demanding change.
Yes.
I have nothing to add to that.
Boom.
And without further ado, I guess that will wrap up our episode for Entrepreneurial Impact with Dave Donaldson, myself, and Keith from Vesta Settlements.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.